Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We've got a lot to break down today. Some positive news on the injury front, some negative news as well, some other things going on to dive into. Keith, how are you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. The injury news on our front was not good.
Yes.
Our daughter has a broken bone in her hand, and her middle school soccer season has come to an end as a result. So, little tough news here. Tough kid though, tougher than her dad. She did it early in the game and stayed in, and actually made a bunch of saves. She's a goalkeeper, and the team won that last game. But I probably would have cried and begged to go to the hospital and asked to have my hand amputated or something. I'm not very tough, but tough kid. But yeah, just a bummer. This is the first time she's ever had any form of like serious injury that's enough to keep her from playing in a game. So it was a little bit of a rough day yesterday, rough morning this morning.
Well, hopefully she heals up quickly. Not fun. We're dealing with a ton of injuries on today's show, and now you've got an injury at home too. It just never stops.
Yeah, we gotta turn injuries off.
That's right.
Somebody put those sliders to 0, please.
Please do that. Please, NBA and Keith's daughter's soccer team. Please put those sliders to 0. We do have a little bit of positive news. LeBron James, he's back.
Yeah.
He's back. Now, there's two ways to look at this, Keith. There's two ways to look at this. So, on one hand, you can say it was a false positive and that he's just good because of that. On the other hand, you can say LeBron James beat COVID in 2 days. That's
or you could look at it and say, well, now we have definitive proof that HGH offsets COVID tests. So we have that as well. No, my guess
perspective.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because LeBron beating COVID in 2 days was not a Lakers perspective.
No.
And it's funny because here we are, both very neutral today in our shades of blue.
That's right.
I think with this for LeBron, obviously great news for the Lakers, right? To get him back. And hey, now it makes sense. He was tweeting that there's something fishy or whatever it was that he tweeted. So I think that is, clearly he must have felt like I'm good. I feel great. Like I'm ready to go. And now to be back this quickly clearly was a false positive. Now, just with the way the COVID stuff works, though, is some guys do feel great. And then we've seen others like Joel Embiid really not feel well. Also, it's all kind of ranges all over the place. So yeah, it is interesting to just see how this continues to play out and develop. But yeah, great news for the Lakers that they're going to get him back because they certainly need him.
Well, and basketball aside, great news just for him, for his health, for his family, all of that sort of stuff, of course, as well. That it did turn out it was a false positive. He took, apparently, from what we saw reported, he's taken 8 COVID tests just to really make sure, and they all came back negative. So that was good news, of course, for him.
Right. I think too that is that shows clearly he felt like it was a false, because you wouldn't take 8 tests over a period of a few days to get back. But hey, if 8 tests show negative, I think the official is you have to return 24 hours apart. So I'm guessing he's feeling pretty good. So good news for him.
Absolutely. All right, moving on some not so great news. Zion Williamson suffered a setback. Now, it's not a setback like he's out for months, but still, any kind of setback with Zion at this point is not a good thing. The Pelicans, their season is already kind of in a really tough spot as it is, so I don't think they're too worried about, oh my gosh, we have to win games right this moment. But still, not a good sign that Zion is already dealing with setbacks on that injured foot.
Yeah, and it's always worrisome whenever a big guy, and I know Zion is not the traditional big in a sense, but he's a big guy. He carries a lot of weight. That's the reality of it. But I think what is worrisome is foot and leg injuries. They just sometimes take a long time to get over them. Sometimes they don't. It's clearly before either one of our times as a peak player, but Walton's career was never the same because of foot injuries. But then you have a guy like Brook Lopez, who early in his career had a ton of foot and leg injuries, and we wondered, is this guy ever going to make it? And then he did, and now he's dealing with a back injury now, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But it is that is he's an example of somebody who got past it. So our hope is right that Zion is able to work through whatever the soreness is. I think the Pelicans are doing the right thing by backing off. They are, let's see, this morning they're 5.5 games out of 10th in the West. So that's 5.5 out of just making it into the play-in tournament. So that seems maybe increasingly less likely that's even going to happen.
Right.
Now, I do think you got to get him back because you want, if nothing else, you want the evaluation time with him and Jonas Valanciunas, him and Brandon Ingram, him and Devontae Graham, just them as a unit there together to see what it all looks like. But yeah, just an absolute bummer because this guy's one of the true bright young stars of the league. We want to see him play.
Yeah, absolutely. You want him out there on the floor. The NBA wants him out there on the floor. Of course, the Pelicans want him out there in terms of just the amount of eyeballs that are going to be on the team. That certainly matters. But then you're right, moving forward, you want to see what all of that looks like when you put it together. And you don't really know because he is the central piece for the Pelicans. So getting him back out on the floor is certainly important. And it's important that he's healthy long term. There's already kind of those rumblings that maybe he might not be too thrilled in New Orleans. It's tough for that to change if he's sidelined. I mean, he's got to have a chance to get out on the floor and experience playing with this team and maybe see some potential moving forward if you're going to shift that narrative at all. But again, these constant injuries, not great. And we've already heard that the weight has been a bit of an issue as well. And dealing with a foot issue, that's a bad combination. So hopefully he does heal up sooner rather than later and gets back out there.
Yeah, I had talked with a trainer years ago, and they said if you had your kind of pick of an injury, you'd rather see a guy in season have something with the upper body, hand, arm, something like that, because then they can still keep their conditioning up. They can still run. They can still do all their things that they need to do in the off season, because so much of the off season is based around ball handling and shooting and that. You want to be able to do that, but in season, if you've got any kind of lower body injury and you can't run and those kind of things, conditioning is going to be an issue. And we've seen with Zion, it's just it's just the way he's built. He's gonna be a guy who's gonna pack on some weight if he's not being super active. So now we've also seen it looks like he can shed it fairly quickly too. So hopefully that is something that comes into play here. But yeah, definitely concerning. For now at least we're here, but right approach by the Pelicans.
This was bizarre and amazing. This took place last night. Everybody on Twitter starts buzzing about a Grizzlies Thunder game. And I'm like, Grizzlies Thunder is getting all this buzz right now, like on this just random Thursday night in the NBA here at the beginning of December. Grizzlies Thunder gets this buzz. And I look at the score and I'm like, that can't be real. There's no way that's right. The Grizzlies beat the Thunder without Ja Morant. The Grizzlies beat the Thunder by 73 points. I think my wife said it best. She said, isn't there a mercy rule or something here? No, there isn't one. This is NBA history. This is the largest margin of victory ever. I mean, and when you would least expect it, Grizzlies Thunder of all teams, and that has now set the record. Amazing.
Yeah, it was really crazy. What ended up kind of catching my eye was I was watching Bulls Knicks. That was the primary game I was watching last night, and that turned out to be a pretty good game in the end. But I started seeing the same thing on Twitter. I started seeing people tweeting about it, and then when it was in the second half, there's a guy on Celtics Twitter at Danger Cart. He is obsessed with the idea of second half double ups where you have twice as many points as your opponents. And he is like, his holy grail is that one happens for a full game. Like he's, as long as I've known him as a Twitter personality, has talked about this, and we were going back and forth on it a little bit, and a whole bunch of other people were and stuff. And it legit was in play all the way down till there was a minute left. If Gabriel Deck doesn't hit a couple shots for the Thunder and the Grizzlies don't miss a few free throws, we would have had a full game double up in points for sure. And it was really bad. And I kind of went to Twitter this morning and said, hey, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter for the Thunder. Yeah, you'd rather play again today. They've got 3 days off now to kind of sit and stew in that own mess. You'd rather get right back out there and try to, all right, let's get this taste out of our mouths and go.
Mm-hmm.
I had a couple people say, no, you got to take a day off. And that says to me, they've never played sports before, because anytime after you come off any form of bad loss, you want to get right back at it. So you feel better. But in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. It's a loss. They're built to lose this year anyway. My bigger thing is I'm a little more worried about their future. Those picks don't look quite as good as they once did. They've made some curious decisions with a couple of trades and those kind of things. But yeah, for one night, they certainly got absolutely blasted. And it was funny because I did have somebody say, did it make you rethink at all that the NBA should expand? Because he's like, the Thunder kind of played like an expansion team. And I was like, it did. It doesn't, because, one, ridiculous blow. It doesn't make me think that. But yeah, what's crazy, the Grizzlies are so all over the place. They've more 25-point losses. It's like 5 or 6 or something like that this year. Then they do 25-point wins and all that. But winning by 73 points will do a heck of a lot of good for your point differential.
I was going to say, how insane is this? The Grizzlies still have a negative point differential on the season.
Yeah.
Like that's they won by 73 points and they're still a negative point differential on the season. That is unreal. I thought for sure they were going to go a negative to positive, a red to green move here, and that did not happen.
Should have threw a full court press on a
little
bit there at the end.
Should have. Could have really helped out that number there. We do have the Pelicans signed Gary Clark for the remainder of the season. So some moves to get into here. Pelicans signing Gary Clark for the remainder of the season. Again, Pelicans looking for healthy bodies, looking for guys who can go out there and do some things for them. So they'll give them a look.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, because this is an interesting mechanic thing here for this. So the Pelicans do not waive a player. What's happening is Didi Louzada, who was suspended for 25 games for violating the performance enhancing drug protocols, policy, whatever you want to call it. After 5 games, that a player on a long-term suspension can be transferred to what's called the suspended list, which in effect it does not free up any salary cap space or anything like that, but it creates a roster opening. And that's what the Pelicans did. Now, why it's a rest of the season contract for Gary Clark is we can't sign 10-day contracts yet. It's not allowed. So you can't go in there and sign a 10-day contract or anything like that. So what the Pelicans did was they signed Clark to a non-guaranteed contract for the remainder of the season. Then when Louzada is back, either Clark will be waived or someone else will have to be waived, because the minute Louzada's 25-game suspension is over, they'll that roster. Around the NBA a little bit, Houston, Orlando, Denver, Philadelphia over the last few years for him. He's forward with a little bit of size, can do some stuff out on the wing. Interestingly enough, he was playing in the G League for the I'm just going to Mexico City Capitans. He had played in 8 games, started 4 of them, was playing okay, but he's just somebody that I think teams know we can bring him in, trust him to do what he does, and be all right with it. So good to see him get another shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and the Pelicans will get to see what he's got for the remainder of the season here. The Nuggets signed Davon Reed on a hardship exemption. Now, Davon Reed joining the Nuggets team that is just, decimated by injuries. It's one thing after another with this team. They do add him on the hardship exemption, and I've seen a few different questions floating around out there on Twitter, Keith, I thought we can get into. What's the difference between a disabled player exemption and a hardship exemption?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So disabled player exception, what the disabled player exception is the way I think of it, hardship is roster exemption. Disabled player exception is a cap exception. So meaning with the disabled player exception, you do not create a roster spot.
Right.
You don't get an additional spot to sign a player, add a player. What you get is you get an exception. Disabled player exception is either it is the greater of half of salary up to the taxpayer or non-taxpayer mid-level exception amount. So if a player makes $30 million, it's going to be the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. If they make $5 million, it's going to be $2.5 million. It's the greater of those two, or I guess the lesser of those two. I don't know. I'm mixing up my math there, but that's how it works. You won't get more than the non-taxpayer, or you'll get half of the salary. So anyway, they are how that works for a team is then they can go out and get a player to trade. There's a bunch of stipulations. It has to be an ending contract. It can't be a contract with more than just the remainder of the season left with no options. All those things. You can sign a player. It can only be used to get one player. All sorts of stuff on that end. A hardship, how that works is when a team is basically hammered by injuries, what they can do is they can get approval for a hardship to add a player. So you can have players up beyond the 15 standard contracts. You can add a player beyond that. So what has to happen for that is 4 players have to be sick or injured for at least 3 regular season games and unable to play. You can petition the NBA for a hardship. They'll grant it, and then you can add. The minute one of those players is able to return, it's much like we just talked about with Luzada, the Pelicans, and Clark. You have to return that player, and then you have to get back into roster compliance. So you'll have to release a player or something like that. So what happens with Davon Reed here is the Nuggets are going to add him via the hardship. They're going to go +1 roster-wise here for a little bit, at least for them, and then they will go through there. Also, hardship can be a temporary thing where disabled player, exception player has to be determined to be more likely than not to be out for the remainder of the season. A hardship thing can be, hey, we got to get you through at least a couple weeks. And this is why for the Nuggets, without PJ Dozier, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., that's 3 guys on long term. And then Bones Highland and Austin Rivers are out due to COVID.
Right.
They tweaked the rules a little bit with COVID-related absences to allow the signings to happen quicker. You don't need to necessarily wait the full amount of games for those guys. But they're down 5 players for at least a chunk of time.
So this is, the hardship exception is the NBA's way of protecting itself from a situation where a team doesn't have enough players to compete. Essentially, that's
Correct.
what they're trying to avoid, is a situation where a team just gets hit by injuries and they don't have enough players to actually truly play a game. And so that's what that exists for. And the Nuggets are certainly in that position right now, given the number of injuries they've got. And so they are able to add someone in Davon Reed. I feel like we're so injury focused today, but that's what's going on at the moment. TJ McConnell is out.
Always. It feels like that's all we've been.
It's been an injury plagued season so far.
Fun.
Not fun, but TJ McConnell out with the sore wrist.
Oh, another one. Yeah, I said it when this news broke. It feels like the Pacers every few days are down another player. That is just you're starting to think the Pacers, it's just not going to be your year. They are 9-15. They're 3 games out of the play-in already. They are 13th in the Eastern Conference. They've lost 3 in a row. Oddly enough, we talked about the Grizzlies not having a positive scoring differential.
Yeah.
The Pacers do. They're +1 scoring differential, so that's a little interesting there with them. But yeah, it's just rough for them. They've been without TJ Warren all season. Justin Holiday's out with COVID. Now McConnell's going to be out. Silvert's been in and out of the lineup. Turner's missed time this year, so Malcolm Brogdon's missed time. At some point, something's got to give, and I just continue to believe that this is the team that seems most ripe to make trades and start moving players amongst kind of any of those teams, because it just feels like they're kind of stuck now. Where are you going from here if you're the Pacers? Are you going to get back into a top, 4 or 5 home court advantage type team? Or are you going to get into, or are you just going to be stuck battling around the play-in and towards the bottom of the playoff picture?
And certainly there's been plenty of buzz around Miles Turner for the last few seasons now. So he would certainly be high on the list of players who could wind up being moved. Some other pieces there that they might look at trading. But yeah, the Pacers are kind of in that dreaded treadmill territory where they're not quite good enough to get a high draft pick, or bad enough to get a high draft pick, but not good enough to really make a run either. So I imagine they probably do make some sort of a move before the trade deadline, which we've got plenty of time there. Don't forget, everybody, December 15th. slowly but surely approaching. That is when a large chunk of the players who signed contracts this last offseason become trade eligible. So that can sometimes
breaking
open
news.
Oh.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Neil Olshey fired.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris Haynes just reported it. Chris Haynes, who is as tight with the Portland organization as anybody. Portland Trailblazers have fired Neil Olshey, ending his 10-year run as the GM and president of basketball operations. League sources tell Yahoo Sports. So there it is. We speculated that might be coming.
So thinking on the fly, that probably means that their investigation turned up not so good things. We don't know for sure what the results of that are. Moving forward, what does this mean for the Blazers? What does this mean for the Damian Lillard situation? Does that change things, you think, if somebody new is coming in and assuming control of the decision making?
Yeah, I think that's where we're gonna see. And Portland has also announced it too with one of their, statement of.
Yes.
Let's see what it
looks
like.
I'm seeing it now.
Oh yeah, it's they put it on the investigation. Following the conclusion of the independent review of concerns and complaints around a workplace environment at the practice facility, the Portland Trailblazers organization has decided to terminate general manager, president of basketball operations Neil Olshey, effective immediately due to violations of the Portland Trailblazers code of conduct. Joe Cronin has been promoted to interim general manager while the organization's leadership conducts a search for a permanent replacement. So, all right, so that solves the why part on there. So what does it mean for the roster, right? So that's the question. First, I guess someone has a conversation with Dame, right?
Yeah.
Well, where are you at now? Does this change things for you? My guess is probably not all that much. This is not generally something that changes much for a player. We saw Luka Doncic talked about how much Donnie Nelson meant to him. And then he signed a full max contract extension with the Mavericks.
Right.
So it's not, I don't think, do these guys care? Yes, it would be insensitive to suggest they don't. I don't think they care that much about the general manager. Players are generally far closer to the coaches than they are anybody else. But you just want to have that conversation, right? Because is this the opportunity for Portland to kind of say, we brought in a new coach in Chauncey Billups. We're now changing the front office. Do we just blow this thing up and move, everybody, start fresh with everything? We've all been kind of wondering, expecting. My guess is no, you want to take a patient approach. If anything, this will impact, do they make moves in the off season versus anything in season? Part of that is also, like we've talked about quite a bit here and in the last couple of weeks, is moving contracts that large is difficult in season. Just it's hard to move 40 plus $1 million contracts without $40 plus $1 million contract coming back.
I would have to imagine that Joe Cronin is right now getting text messages from the Philadelphia 76ers.
Probably.
Because
probably.
I'm sure they are monitoring the situation very closely. I think that's the deal they want, right? If they're going to move Ben Simmons, they want Damian Lillard. Again, that's not me saying that's what's going to happen or anything here, but the 76ers, I'm sure, are monitoring this very closely, as are other teams around the NBA, to see ultimately what the Blazers decide to do. I agree with you, though, Keith. I think that most likely, if they're going to do anything, they wait until the off season to blow anything up. But we'll see. We'll see. You never know when you have this kind of transition of power, particularly when somebody's got the interim tag. It's hard to make a big move like that on an interim tag. But still, you never know what this might do to different negotiations and things like that. But bottom line, some interesting breaking news there out of Portland.
Yeah, absolutely. Just, as you said too, this is other GMs are, and I mean this with all respect, they're vultures, right? So they're going to come in and say, hey, well, what are we doing here? Let's start really looking with this. The team has underperformed. I just finished a radio hit in Portland before we started recording about a big chunk of it was they're 11 and 12. They're kind of not looking that good. Their offense is really good. Their defense isn't. The offense has slipped just enough, which is push them below 500. Where do we go? Damian Lillard's out for 10 days with an abdominal injury. It starts to add up of eventually it is, yeah, the wheels are off this thing. Let's look to start going a different direction and moving along.
Agreed. So we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, Keith, we talked earlier about Zion Williamson and how injuries, but especially lower body injuries to big men, can be really bad news. You know what else can be bad news for big men? Back injuries. And that is now what Brook Lopez continues to deal with, and found out yesterday that he did have back surgery. So makes the DeMarcus Cousins signing for the Milwaukee Bucks make even more sense. But Brook Lopez out with back surgery. Bad news out of Milwaukee. Again, more negative news on the injury front. Hate that.
Yeah, it's rough. This adds a little color to why the Bucks, who are a team that is far deeper into the tax than they usually are, was willing to move to add DeMarcus Cousins right away. That was something for sure that came a little bit as a surprise if you really follow these things as we do here. So that was one of those things where it was, that's interesting. But it makes sense now because they clearly knew Brook Lopez was going to be on the shelf for a while. Now, no timeline given or anything like that. We don't even know what kind of back surgery this was. But yeah, Brook Lopez out for, let's say, at least a while for sure. And they brought in Cousins, played him the other night, looked pretty good, I think, in his debut game. Then he probably sat out the second night of a back-to-back. Not surprising, as he's just working his way back there. But yeah, he is that could end up being a fairly important acquisition for the Bucks, especially if Lopez is going to be out for any serious amount of time, because their only other bigs on the roster of note are Bobby Portis and Giannis, and that's clearly not enough. Those two guys are very good, and Giannis is arguably the best player in the world right now, but that's just not enough.
No.
You need more to go. Otherwise, by the time you get to the playoffs, those two guys aren't going to have anything left to give you.
Correct. Yeah. So smart move by the Bucks then, especially given this Brook Lopez news, to bring in Boogie Cousins, gives them a floor spacing big. I mean, not going to replace what Brook Lopez brought, but still gives you at least a similar skill set there. Of course, you lose a lot of rim protection, but he can at least shoot from outside a bit and give you some offensive skills. Oh, man. I hate these episodes where it's so many injuries, Keith. I should have finished with the LeBron thing and finish on a positive, but
I know, right? We should have built to that one.
That's right. Ugh. Oh, well, next time. Yeah. All right, everybody. Appreciate you joining us. As always, make sure you are subscribing to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Turn on those notifications. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure that you are following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd love to get your reviews there as well. And of course, a 5-star rating would be preferable. Till next time, everybody, stay safe and see you.